Morning, everyone. Welcome. Once again, the Brain Health Team is sponsoring a talk today on Parkinson's disease. And somebody who's doing the presenting, Marilyn Malou, knows firsthand about Parkinson's. She's living with it. So we're going to have a presentation. We'll have Q&A after the fact. And just to let you know, please, cell phones, this is my pet peeve. Please turn them off. Turn them to vibrate, turn them to anything but nothing that makes noise. The speaker appreciates it. Your people next to you appreciate it. It's just appreciated. So thank you very much. The second thing I'd like to point out about today's presentation, Marilyn and Tom will be talking about foundations. We in no way are trying to solicit you for funds for those presentations. It's strictly what those foundations have to offer in terms of Alzheimer's, in terms of Parkinson's, in terms of Parkinson's research. So this is in no way, no how a fundraiser. So please do not take it as such. So with that being said, and Q&A to follow, please hold your questions till the end. I turn the mic over to Marilyn.
Thank you. I'm going to start by talking about how Parkinson's disease got its name. An English physician was the first person to systematically describe individuals with the symptoms of the disease that bears his name. He did this in 1817 he wrote an essay on the shaking palsy. He reported on 3 of his own patients and also 3 persons whom he saw on the street. So he went out and met these men and talked to them and came up with this description of the shaking palsy. Then a French neurologist later on found the essay and renamed or suggested that the name be changed to Parkinson's disease, for which I am very grateful, so that I don't have to walk around with a shaking palsy. So what is Parkinson's disease? It is important to realize that it is a lifelong and progressive disease. Once you have it, it's going to be with you right now for the rest of your life, and it will become worse over time. Although my neurologist keeps telling me, stop worrying about things that may never happen for you, Marilyn. The experience of Parkinson's is different for every person. Its symptoms and progression vary from person to person. So you may know one person with Parkinson's, but that person may be experiencing things very differently than the next person with Parkinson's. The 4 cardinal symptoms of the disease are resting tremor. There we go, sorry. Resting tremor, which means that when you are resting, your whatever is going to be tremor will be shaking. Slowness of movement, which you may have noticed in myself. I'm always the last one to arrive at anything. Impaired balance, which is getting worse for me, which is why I'm now a person with a rollator. And finally, rigidity and stiffness. It's for these reasons that it is called a movement disorder, but there can be much more to it. we talk about the Parkinson's iceberg. The things that you see and that most people connect with the disease are tremor, rigidity, achalasia, brachianesia, and postural differences. But what people don't see are all the other things that can be involved in Parkinson's. Parkinson's is a lack of the neurotransmitter dopamine in a particular part of the brain. The problem is that it does affect movement, but it also affects lots of other neurotransmitters. So you do get problems with things like sleep, bladder dysfunction, depression, anxiety, gastric reflux, hallucinations, which I do not have, but I can certainly see where they come from. If I see something out of the corner of my eye, my mind will make something of it. For instance, I looked out my window one day and I saw what looked like yellow flowers, but they weren't flowers at all. They were yellow trash out there. Sweating, dementia, and erectile difficulties in men. We also have problems or can have problems with constipation, speech, swallowing difficulties, panic attacks, loss of smell, which was one of the very first symptoms that I had 2 years before I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I remember so clearly being in the doctor's office because I'd gone to a specialist about my loss of smell. And there was a young intern in there. And when I said something here about, like, I'm here because I can't smell, the intern started to say, oh my goodness, that can be associated with. And the doctor must have given him a dirty look because he stopped right there. Let's see. Lack of facial expression. People with Parkinson's are often, it's suggested that they walk around with sort of a mask on their face. They just don't ever change that look on their face. So people often, they'll think they're smiling for a photograph, but they're not. Hypotension, which is low blood pressure, which can cause people to stand up too quickly, perhaps, and faint. Impulse control disorder. People can have problems with things like gambling, etc., and delusional behavior. Thinking that, for instance, your son or daughter is getting into your money or something like that. Delusions. There are lots of therapies available for Parkinson's. There's medication. One of the most important is something called levodopa. Levodopa is a medication that most people take with another medication called carbidopa. So we take something called carbidopa levodopa. And what that does is replace or attempt to replace the missing dopamine in your brain. The reason, and I was just watching a video of this the other day, the reason we take the levodopa and the way we have to take it is on an empty stomach in order, because it goes down to the small intestine, which is where it enters the bloodstream to go back up to the brain. and then enters the brain to try to replace the missing dopamine. Another therapy includes surgery or deep brain stimulation is one of those surgeries. We'll talk a little bit later about Davis Phinney, who was an American bicyclist who had early onset Parkinson's. He was diagnosed when he was 40 years old. And this is a man who had won at least 2 of the stretches in the Tour de France bicycle race. But his balance and his tremors got so bad he had to retire from bicycling. Well, they went in and put some implants in his brain, and the effects were absolutely immediate. His wife said, "I haven't seen you smile in 2 years," but he said, "I feel in control again." Another type of surgery that they do is called lesion surgery, which is where they go in and cut out parts of your brain. So if they know that there's a part that's causing the tremor, they can go out and cut that out. There are also physical therapy exercises to improve your mobility, balance, and coordination. And I'm going to come back in just a moment to that. Occupational therapy, which are activities of daily living assistance, such as dressing and bathing. Speech therapy to address speech problems and swallowing difficulties. And then nutritional counseling to maintain a healthy diet and manage weight. Now, what I have skipped over was the LSVT big. LSVP stands for Lee Silverman's voice training. Now, Lee Silverman was a woman who had Parkinson's, and she was working with a doctor who the family pleaded with the doctor to help her speak better because they said, if only we could understand her. And so they have developed over time a speech program called LSVT Loud or Speak Out is a program that is one that I have done and I'm about to go back into again because it requires daily practice, which you can do online, but I have not been doing it and it's having an effect. The LSVT big is physical therapy. One of the things that Parkinson's does is sort of shrink you. You kind of get small. So what this does is teaching your body to expand. So there's a lot of this kind of thing. And this afternoon, I'm going back into physical therapy over at Vassar for that. Because again, I thought when I got here, I could just use Matt's program, which is wonderful, but it's obviously not enough for me. Yeah. Emerging treatments include gene therapy, which is looking at some of the genetic defects that cause Parkinson's, and then stem cell therapy, which is an approach that is thinking about replacing the damaged dopamine producing cells in the brain by using stem cells. These are both just emerging. There's hope for these things, but they're not there yet. So, where are we? Parkinson's is thought to be partially genetic, but then very much environmental. So they're very interested in all these chemicals that we live with all the time and how that may be affecting us. I taught on military bases for 30 years, and some of the buildings I taught in were very, very old. And I sometimes wonder what it was that I may have been breathing in that could have caused my Parkinson's. Again, as I said, what it is a lack of a brain neurotransmitter called dopamine. And what we are lacking is enough dopamine. It is thought that 80% of the dopamine is lost before you get the first sign of Parkinson's. As I had said to you before, smell was one of my first indicators. And then right after I finished this master's degree in children's book writing and illustrating, 2 weeks later, I started with the tremor. And I called my doctor who happened to live in my neighborhood, and she was out walking her dog. And I said, I think I need to come see you. She had me to the neurologist within 4 days. It was wonderful. But again, we are totally unaware of what the connection between the genetics and the environment is. So that's what they're working on. Okay.
When when we thought about putting this program on, it was thought that perhaps not to spend too much time on the basics, what Marilyn has just gone through, and more of, as she said earlier on, Parkinson's is a very individual, very specific, very unique disease. And when we looked at setting up the program, was what we wanted to do was to share with you what we found in both literature searches and other things, things that you can use, resource aids that you can take and go and decide, is this important for me or for my family or for my relative or friend? So what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to talk about things like people that are doing cure research, people that are actually looking to cure Parkinson's. And there are a few of them, and I'll talk about them. And also then a number of support and awareness groups that are very, very helpful. And then the last one is policy. Who's controlling that? So the first one is on cures. Other than the government, the largest private foundation looking at curing is Michael J. Fox, and we all know his visibility and infamousy of what he has. Michael Fox Foundation funds pure research. And so if you're looking for cures or things that they're working on, this is a good resource to go to. And we have packets that we'll be passing out. All of the people that I'm listing here are there and give you a sort of a recap of what they do and how to get a hold of them. So I'm not going to talk about each one of them because I'll repeat it in there. But the one thing we've kind of given them our red heart of, this is a good one, use them extensively. I put on a couple other ones then when I was doing the research on it that in UK, they are very actively for the European market looking at cures as well. So if you see something or hear something, they also are a very good resource to look into what are they working on, so you can see where it's going. Marilyn talked about, and I think we can share with you that one of the things that for a cure that's being done is a study PPMI or PPMI. I think Ina and Marilyn are involved in it.
It is a survey that you get, and you can participate if you have Parkinson's or if you do not have Parkinson's. So it's comparing those two groups over time. Ina and I both get surveys online that we can answer. It's just a series of questions. I was surprised to be asked if I had ever had frozen shoulder. I have, and that is evidently something they're looking into. I also want to say about Michael J. Fox. He was an early onset diagnosis. He was 29 years old when he got first diagnosed, which is very young. My daughter worked with him on his television program, Spin City. And at that time, he had not let the world know that he had Parkinson's. So she said he would come out and do his scenes and then go back to his dressing room. But she also said he was as nice a person as she has ever met. So we encourage people who are interested in research to look at the PPMI, which again, you can participate in if you have or if you do not have Parkinson's.
Thank you. Does want to freeze on me, doesn't it? All right. I guess I'm too fast for it. Anyway, for the support side, there are, as it shows here, numerous organizations, and each one sort of looks at particular aspects, like the American Parkinson's Disease Association looks at caregivers, care help, things that you do with that. The Davis Finney organization, as Marilyn said earlier, looks at physical activities that you can do to improve your lot with your Parkinson's. The one, and then these other are, again, focused on certain areas of care and support. We, now it goes, we would like you to look at the Hudson Valley group. I don't know if I can get this back. No. Anyway, they are, it's a wonderful website. It also specifies all the other groups that I showed up there, and they tell you what's good about each one of them. So it's, to me, it's the site to go to. Start there and let it take you through. The other area that we wanted to share with you was about policy. Policy being what the government's doing and how that's being worked on. Marilyn wanted to share with you that in Biden's administration, they did pass this law, and the effects of it, because no one had really approached it in the legislative manner that way. But as you can read, it's an advisory council was supposed to be set up, and I'm not sure with the conditions and the government right now, how all that's working out. But the goals of the act were to, as you can see, do research and has a very broad but excellent ideas for what needs to be done in the program. And in looking at the policy, when I asked what was the government's control of it, they mentioned in this order that the National Health Institute is the one that sets policies and funds and directs the funding of it. Then you have the National Institute of Neurological Disorders. They are the ones that control where the funds go. So you have one drops down to the other, which drops down then also because of the idea that Parkinson occurs later in life. But as Marilyn said, Michael Fox started at 29. Finney was what, 40? So it's age, I don't think it's age discriminated anymore, or at least shouldn't be considered that. The other one that came up in my search was the CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. They're very important in this because, as you see, obviously, they control who gets paid and who, if you go for services, how much they'll pay them. So these are people or organizations that if you hear about them doing something with Parkinson, read a bit more about it, find out what they're trying to do. I did again discover as I was doing the search for this, that in Europe, there is an organization that for Europe and England, that this European Parkinson's Association helps work with the various countries' departments of health to set policies. So if you wanted to see what they're doing, and Athena is another one. But the other thing that we wanted to be sure everybody understood is we have our own resource right here. Marilyn runs the group, and it's right now the fourth Wednesday at 1. And it's, I guess, for the time being, we're saying it's in the conference room, but stay tuned with the construction starting. Things will be moving very, very rapidly. So that's sort of the idea of what we wanted to do with support. So this is the team, and okay, we'll take some questions now.
Questions?
Do you know if Trump's big, beautiful bill has cut these budgets to the NIH?
I didn't ask that question when I did my search, Rolf.
Okay.
I would imagine they're not protected from it. I would imagine they got severely hurt.
I know when I've gone to some of these sites now, there'll be like a warning label
Yes.
at the beginning saying that due to the cutbacks in the government spending, we are unsure as to what's happening in our, the information that will come next.
Yeah, that was what I found as you went on like the NIH, and they said, this may not be updated information. Don't rely upon it because we don't have a government funding. So, but it is what we have here in America. And I think it's just, again, to be aware of it. Anything else? Good question.
There's a handout that will be given out or that will be passed around short, 2 parts. There's a single page and a stapled page. So please feel free to, they're being passed out by Pat. I would like to point out that the Brain Health Team, which we're very proud of, today, all the members of the Brain Health Team are wearing the Brain shirts. So if you have any questions about brain health or about potential speakers or anything else, please see one of us. We'd love to hear from you, or better yet, participate.
Could you email this out? I don't want another piece of paper.
Tom?
I'm not sure, you have that one sheet we can mail out? We'll try and put it together, June. We'll try and put it together.
Are there any other questions?
The other thing is a little bit of a heads up. December 11th at 11 o'clock, we will have another brain health program, and it's going to be presented by Peter Brown, and he will be Peter Roberts, excuse me. Peter Roberts talking about being in the medical business, or how was the?
A physician's firsthand guide to watching a family member with Alzheimer's. It's kind of the working title, exact. I can't give it to you, but that's the general idea. For those of you who know, Peter is a resident. His wife is in Garden View, and he's been dealing with this firsthand for a number of years. He's going to speak about what it's like on two ends, being a member of the profession and a doting husband. So it should be very interesting. So please, December 11th.
I just want to say that 30 years ago, my husband had Parkinson's disease, and what has happened since is quite remarkable. There's so many more resources. There's so much more. In those days, the early diagnosis was simply done by the fact that he had trouble walking and his handwriting changed. That was the main source of diagnosis. And now there's so much more, it's so much more, and there's so many more opportunities to deal with it, both as a family member and medical stuff. I'm so glad this is going on.
Thank you. That's
Thank you,
very
Monica.
important to know.
Thank you.
The levodopa itself is considered one of the modern medical miracles, if you will. Yes. Yes. And they do combine it with the carbidopa to avoid it breaking down before it gets to the brain. So it's just a wonderful disease. I had tremor, as I said. It was my first clue that something was wrong. And within days, the tremor was gone. So people often don't know that I have Parkinson's, because when people think of Parkinson's, they think of tremors. And so lots of times people are surprised. Of course, when you look at that iceberg and you see the voice problems, you know immediately that that's one of my unseen problems with Parkinson's. We talk a lot about Parkinson's affects the autonomic nervous system, which are the things you do that you don't think about, like speaking or walking. You don't think about those things. But the opposite of that is the intentional nervous system, which is the things you have to think about while you're doing them. So a lot of times in the voice, in particular, in the voice therapies, they'll talk about speaking intentionally. So you have to think about how you're going to speak. I'm speaking a little louder right now than I might usually, because when I speak, it sounds normal to me, but it's not loud enough for you. So that's intentional on my part. I do find that when I'm out, I try to walk with more intention. That means to really be thinking about how I'm walking. They really emphasize putting your heel down first, etc., as opposed to letting any leg sort of drag behind. So intentionality is something we do talk a lot about because it avoids things that you do with intention, avoid that section, the substantia nigra, which is where the dopamine is normally produced. And again, that's where the autonomic nervous system feeds through that area. And so the dopamine is very missed. However, we can avoid it by using the intentional nervous system.
Thank you. Any other questions? In that case, please join me in thanking Marilyn and Tom. And, you know, it's kind of like you can read a book and you can read the studies and everything else, and you're like, oh, okay. But when you get it firsthand, that's the eye-opening experience. So I'm sure if you have any further questions and you see Marilyn, you can please stop and ask her questions, and it would be most well received. So on behalf of the Brain Health Team, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you December 11th for Peter Roberts.
Thank you.